We are pleased to present this next session, a candid conversation on identity, intersectionality, and privilege. To lead us in the discussion, please welcome Layla A. Ramirez, Senior Program Manager, Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity for Amazon Web Services. She is accompanied by Dr. Yonesy Nunez, Chief Information Security Officer, Jack Henry & Associates, and Nick Chang, Global Head Customer Success Solutions and Strategy for Palo Alto Networks.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you. Just
Exciting.
1 second. I think I can't seem to see the visual, but oh, bam, there we go. Okay. Hello, good to see everyone. So my name is Layla Ramirez. It is a pleasure to be joining to be moderating this panel. I am your moderator for today on this panel on identity, intersectionality, and privilege. And in a moment, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. But first, I wanted to just share a few things. First and foremost, thank you, High Tech, and our panelists, as well as AWS, for allowing us an opportunity to speak on this very important topic. And then second, thank you to all of you, our viewers, for watching and your willingness to engage. Please send your questions in the chat and feel free to go back and forth with one another so that we can all sort of have a rich experience here. And then the last thing is really just a word of caution. So during this conversation, we're going to go deep, and you may be confronted with some thoughts or beliefs or feelings that you might find hard to hold or to process. And I just want to encourage everyone to really sit with that discomfort and to the degree that you can, go ahead and get curious, be introspective, and then I promise you won't regret it. So that's all in terms of housekeeping. Again, I want to thank you, Nick and Jonesy, for joining me today and sharing your thoughts and your stories and a timely message with folks as we think about these topics and these really loaded terms. So I'll turn it over to you. Maybe we'll start with Nick, and then Jonesy, feel free to jump in. Just share a little bit about yourselves, the name, your company. Tell us a bit about yourself personally and professionally. And then just to make it fun, what is one superpower you might credit your cultural identity for?
Okay. Well, Layla, thank you for the chance, and thanks for High Tech as well, right? To be able to talk about this. This is really a topic that is really top of mind for everyone, right? Even now, before, tomorrow, it's going to be key. So a little bit about myself for folks that don't know me. But yeah, I am born and raised in Ecuador, Guayaquil, Ecuador, to be more precise. When I was 24 years old, I decided after graduating college, I came to the United States here to explore a new life, and would actually know myself and my whole family moved in here about 30 years ago now at this point. Yes, I am Chinese, so I'm 80% Chinese, 20% Ecuadorian, Spanish Chinese. My grandmother from my dad's side was the only Ecuadorian Spanish side. Her last name was Vega, so you can tell where the in there. But being born raised in Ecuador give me the Latin culture, and for sports, of course, Spanish is my first language. But a combination of the biracial, growing up at home was Chinese culture with Chinese food and in a Chinatown area, Guayaquil, and so on. And living in Ecuador. So we'll talk more about that. But I'm super excited about the chance. I'm super excited to share thoughts as well as to listen to others about this.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. Jonesy?
Thank you so much, Nick and Layla. So happy to be here with both of you today to talk about this important topic. So a little bit about me. I'm Yonesy Nunez. I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic, and I would say that that background and upbringing me has really helped me be the person that I am today. You mentioned what's one superpower that our culture has. I grew up in an area of very limited means, so we had to do what we had to do on everything. So I think our superpower is like being MacGyver, right? That was my favorite show growing up, and basically figure it out, innovate,
Yeah.
and do with anything that you have to make it work. So I find that to be my superpower. And I think in everything that I do, there's always a way forward. We can always get it done. We just have to, como lo dicen, echarle ganas, right? And we go and get it done. So that's our superpower.
That's right. And I don't know, Nick, if you wanted to jump in with your superpower. I don't know if you missed that.
Yeah, I forgot actually to mention it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say my superpower to be able to listen to other people's conversation in Spanish, and people think, oh yeah, he doesn't speak Spanish, and they open their eyes like, wow. The same thing actually on the Chinese side, because I don't look 100% Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
When they listen to me, I speak Cantonese, so then they listen to me back, look at me weird. So yeah, superpower of understanding other people and culture from different backgrounds. That's what will be the one. And I do a mean paella, so that one's a superpower as well.
Ow. Love it. We know whose house we're going to next. Okay.
There
Thank
you
you
go.
both for sharing a little bit about yourself. So, as I mentioned, and maybe what I'll do is real quick. So, for folks who are curious or wondering, I also do identify as Dominican. My parents are from the Dominican Republic. I grew up in New York City. And so it's great to be joined in this setting with fellow Dominicans and other folks who identify as Latinx. This is like a career high for me. So with that, I wanted to really quickly just frame our conversation by talking a little bit about terms and definitions. So when we think about the topic of this session, right, identity, intersectionality, and privilege, right? These are loaded terms. They've been in the media, lots of discussions around our offices around these topics. So I just really quickly want to start by asking you folks, first and foremost, where do your thoughts go when you hear identity and intersectionality? And Nick, we'll start off with you.
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting one for me because all my life I've been living as a minority, right? A Chinese descendant living in Ecuador, and then even when I moved here, right, as an immigrant myself. So to me, the identity comes from two strong backgrounds. I mean, you have the Chinese, very, very traditional, a lot of deep roots along the way, right? The identity comes in there, and that's where I think where it really come across as, well, you two different places, they will be polar opposites, but in reality, you start to find that there's a lot of similarities, and we'll talk more about later on decision making and what type of leadership skills I'll be able to form about it. But in reality, it's a privilege to me. It's complete privilege. In the past, I thought about, oh my God, I cannot handle this. I don't know where to fit, if I'm fitting anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, it's a privilege. It's a privilege that I inherit and I earn it, and I'll be able to take advantage of it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yonesy?
Yeah, so from my standpoint, I think that I've always been lucky. And what I mean by that is having a great support structure, family, friends, and people that really saw something in me and helped me move forward. So I would say from my upbringing and environment, is that hustle privilege, right? I think
Mm.
that's my privilege is that I like to hustle. I like to do and work as hard as I can. So that has allowed me to create a better life for myself. And now I'm really helping the world around me be better. So, their privilege comes in multiple different ways. And your job is really to identify what privilege you have. It can come in the form of expert power, knowledge power. It could be your race, your ethnicity, your religion is how you choose to use that privilege to help those around you.
Excellent. Yeah, and really quickly, since you all both sort of got into into privilege, right? I want to take a quick note, a quick side, and just really clarify when we think about the term privilege, we're really talking about like social advantages or benefits or degrees of prestige that one might assign to an individual by virtue of just belonging to a certain social identity group, right? And so there are very technical sort of definitions, but that's the one that we're working with today. And so on that topic, I really wanted to sort of double down on something that came up during the prep, particularly as we talked. So there's this idea that when we think about privilege, right, there's a relativity to it, right? This idea that your environment, your context, how you're positioned, and where what the power dynamics might be in the different environments might lend itself to you having privilege or not. So I know, Jonas, you mentioned that a little bit. So when you think about how you've been able to maybe where privilege has advantaged you or where it might have disadvantaged you, what are some of the thoughts or stories that come to mind?
Yeah, so I would say that, as I mentioned, from an advantage standpoint, I think that hustle really is recognized by anyone and everyone. People can see that you want to get ahead, you're working hard. So that's one way that it advantages you. But at the same time, if you look at the opposite side of that coin, is well, why is this person working so hard? Why are they trying so hard? Is there a try hard and you're trying to take my spot? Why are you trying to take my spot? So there are always pros and cons, and I think you have to ground yourself in doing the right thing, no matter what, and and have sort of that as your north star, because perception, right? They say it's 9/10 of reality. So be the change you want to be, right? It needs to start within you and to affect the world around you. So again, there are pros and cons, but my view is people understand the hustle. People understand what doing the right thing is. Every scenario is different. You have to bring yourself, your full self, to each situation. And one of the things I learned much later in my career was the component of authenticity. Oftentimes, I had to be someone that I felt folks wanted me to be to fit in, right? You know, we were talking earlier. I've always been driven to, I have a terminal degree in information and cybersecurity. Who does that? Well, I had to do it because I felt that I needed to do something to stand out because, identifying as an Afro Latino growing up in the Bronx, it was really difficult to overcome a lot of the challenges that were there. You know, growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, it was really difficult for someone like me to make it to where I am today. And, what high tech is doing in other organizations to really pull others up is great. And I think, again, it goes back to what are we doing to make the world better? And I think we have to send the elevator, the stairs, the submarine.
Mm-hmm.
We have to keep the lines of communications open and be accessible. So that's why I'm so excited to be here today.
Awesome. Nick, anything to add there?
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, you have a great. That's a tough act to follow. No, but no, I mean, seriously speaking, I mean, I agree with you. I see there, especially when you come from my background, right? I see 3 points that are that are meaningful and they're actually common ground between the cultures. One of them is respect. The other one's a family first mentality, I call it. Number three is very, very similar to Yonesy that you just described, is a trailblazer. Respect coming from whatever culture from. We have the Latino culture very strong about respect, respecting our elders, respecting opinions. I mean, not agree with them, but they will respect them. And that's a key trait that it builds character and leadership, and that's a privilege. You know. The second point is about family first. I mean, how many times you remember when you were little, going back, you have everybody meeting you at the airport or saying goodbye at the airport because it's everybody, your aunts and uncles and cousins and everybody else, right? And the same thing, every time there's a party, you have a party minimum of 100 people because there are a lot of
That's
people,
right.
a lot of cousins, third cousin, fourth cousin, fifth cousins, So, but that tells you, right, the fact that everybody's in there. So that type of, it becomes a privilege because as leaders, we have to embrace everybody who's going to be working with you, for you, or above you, and to be able to make it feel like a family, right? Because you have to be inclusive. You have to be able to respect the ideas, but also be able to empower them, right, to success. And the last one, very similar, what you said, be a trailblazer. There, as we all know, there are only two things that are fixed in life, death and taxes. Everything else is negotiable. And as Latinos, and as well as the Chinese culture, we negotiate everything,
Mm-hmm.
everything. So if you want to have this, or this is too expensive, let me go cheaper. I still remember in school, in college, where this textbook was so expensive, we take it, we photocopy it, and then we sell 500 copies of the paper version of it to everybody. So
I love that. I love that. The ingenuity, the innovation, all the creativity, right? When we think about all the different ways that we've been able to sort of, I like to use the term reframe, right? What others might have might have referred to as like a disadvantage, you reframe that and you make that your comparative advantage, right? And so, with that being the case, right, and since you all sort of started getting into it, thinking about the corporate context, right? When you think about, places and spaces that you've been in, um, could you talk about a time when you felt like maybe you were, where you knew you were abundantly clear that what you were bringing to the conversation or what you were bringing to the event was different than your counterparts and how you navigated that situation?
I think it's a great Great point you bring up there. And using your culture and your background to be authentic and be you, it's probably the best thing that you can do to make sure you leave a lasting impression. I'll give you an example. I joined Jack Henry about a year ago, and over the summer, we had our national sales and marketing meeting, and it was the first time that I actually traveled to meet everyone, folks in the company, right? So I had a big presentation to talk about the information and cybersecurity program, and I came onto that stage doing a salsa dance because that's who I wanted them to remember me by,
Love it.
right? That I am different, and that's okay, but we're here together to do the right thing. And I'm still, it was my 1 year anniversary today, actually. I'm getting a bunch of notes from folks here saying, we love what you've been doing for us here, keeping us protecting our customers. But wow, I do remember you at the National Sales and Marketing meeting because of your salsa dance. When are you giving us lessons? So I think that that could be part. I'm not saying go to every presentation you do doing bachata or salsa or
Hmm.
merengue or whatever. I'm not saying that, but bring your authenticity, bring your culture with you because people are going to like you. They're going to enjoy you for who you are, but you have to be, I think Layla mentioned it earlier, be vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable because we're all human beings at the end of the day. And I think that the stoicness that everything has to be, fit a box, I think that's a thing of the past. And I think we have to bring our full, authentic selves each and every day. And I feel better about myself and the world around me because I'm allowed to have that comfort.
Awesome. And thank you. I mean, first and foremost, congratulations on your 1 year anniversary. I also do want to say that as you think about as you bring more and more of yourself, you essentially create the space for other folks to bring more and more of themselves, right? So just thank you for letting folks know, right? Bring it, right? Nick, wanting to turn over to you. What are your thoughts and reflections when you think about those times when you came and you brought something different? And you were abundantly clear and aware that, like, you know what, I'm bringing something special here.
No, no, it's interesting, and I'm gonna probably steal the that interest you're saying, for the next for my company's next sales kickoff. Um, no, so it's interesting because it's amazing. It really amazes me, how similar cultures are when you go. I mean, I have been doing global roles for the past 15 years now. So when I go to, like, for example, Japan, I used to work for Itachi, the VP of customer success out there, and the way you do business is very respectful along the way. There's no arguments. But then when you want to get together and then really bring that synergy among teams, the Japanese teams and the US team, for example, yeah, I brought the Latino style thinking. Why? Because they want to open up, but they're very reserved as a culture, right? The same thing when I was with NetApp and working with the Germans and Fujitsu and Fujitsu Siemens. So those are the examples where you realize, wow, okay, I can bring, to Yosemite's point, actually, we are authentic about it, right? But they see it as a non-threat. There's a non-threat. They see there's curiosity about it, and they realize, oh yeah, I like this, and I like that, and then that's how we tie together. We, the Latinos, one of the best traits that we have is we are relationship people. We forget about that part because sometimes the corporate norms will say you have to do your thing and you move on. On the other hand, we just the opposite. We are relationship people. We have to read the room though. So we cannot bring a lot of energy in a room that is that, but you have to bring some energy that little by little start to adopt along the way, right? So those are things that we have to start thinking about more and more in this. And there's an example of, and I may have more examples, but we'll go from there.
Awesome. Well, when I think about bringing the energy and us as a very relational group of people, I think about storytelling. And I know,
Yeah.
Jonesy, that you mentioned that storytelling is a special, sort of like a special way that you have. So I'd love for you to chime in a little bit and tell us about how you bring the energy with the storytelling and what it's done for you.
So, I think we mentioned that I grew up in a very challenged town in the Dominican Republic. I'm from the Southwest, Aswa, It's the province that I'm from, and within that province, I was born and raised in a very small town, thatch roof homes, no
Mm.
floor, dirt floors, no TV, no electricity. So it was all about storytelling, right? That's how the world came to us via stories. And I grew up listening to stories and telling stories. And that's kind of the approach that I use today to educate, to have discussions, get different points of views and perspectives. And it's not only telling the story, but empathizing as to how other people see the story. When I first saw Pulp Fiction, I fell in love with that movie because it was a different POV at different stages that kind of allows you to empathize with others, right, and what they're going through, so that you can tell the story. Um, a drawback from that is that I tend to use idioms that only Dominicans would understand, right? And try to translate that into English sometimes doesn't work. So my boss he says he's going to write a book about Yonesy's metaphors. 99% of those metaphors are based on Dominican culture idioms. So, that's kind of my spiel on storytelling. And I think I'm going to write out the rest of my life telling stories, because that's sort of how I grew up.
Awesome. And I mean, and you sort of touched on this, Jonas. I wanted to just say that part of what storytelling, like what's so magical about storytelling, is that it allows me essentially to see my experience in you, and for you to see your experience in me and or in mine. And that creates a really sticky connection, right? And that's something that we can build from. It's solid. So with that in mind, right, thinking about again the corporate context and how we might marry what we might do just culturally to cultural corporate norms or corporate cultural norms. I'd love to hear from both of you, and maybe we'll start with Nick on this one. When you think about reconciling, ethnic cultural norms and corporate cultural norms, like how do you do that, and what happens when these things conflict?
Well, I would say they will always conflict, right? Because it depends on what type of leader you want to be and how you're going to fit, right? If I'm going back to our earlier point, we are trailblazers, we are breaking the norm, we are negotiating everything, and so on, as to be able to drive innovation. If you're going to drive innovation, especially in my background, you have the two type of background. One of them is about the knowledge about how to be able to build it, and then you bring the energy associated with it, right? Because those one of the things where innovation is always faces a lot of risk and naysayers. And if we can say, if we just accept the first no, then there was no innovation. But we are stubborn people. We're very stubborn. But that's the the ethnicity kicking in the way into a corporate norm. But why you say no? Let me challenge it in a very polite way, which is going back to my earlier point. Be respectful, embrace everyone, but also let's start breaking barriers, because what you are doing right now may not be the way you're going to be doing it in the future. And that, to me, that's been very valuable. And that applies not only just here in the United States, it applies to a lot of the countries that I've been doing business with, and the different cultures along the way.
Awesome. Jonas, what are your thoughts?
I want to say that this is a kind of a difficult, tough subject, right? Because
Hmm.
coming from the background that I come from, obviously I had to deal with that in the Dominican Republic. Coming to the United States, right? You see it in the movies, you see it on TV. You think, wow, it can't be the same. It's going to be different, and it's really different, right? So, if I talk a little bit about how the situation was in the Dominican Republic, is as if we were trying to hide who we were, if that
Hmm.
makes sense, right? Whereas in America is a little bit different. I'm proud of who I am, so let's talk about it. And I think that it's that cultural change, ethnic change was difficult for me in adjusting here to different cultures, same type of people but different, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then when I think about kind of the workforce, right? The adaptation along the way, right? We talk about hustle, we're talking about being fair and doing the right thing. Every situation and through life that you're going to change. The culture around you is changing as we speak right now. Things are
Hmm.
changing, right? The internet has pushed us to move much faster than we have in the last 50 years. So I would say we have to remain steadfast and allow the change to happen. Take the time to understand what that means for us and the world around us, but also really focusing on three things, right? First, be fair, do the right thing, and be authentic. I think if you do those three things well, people will notice, and that will allow you to adapt. And I try to ground myself, right? I saw that movie, Spike Lee joint, Do the Right Thing, and I got to tell you that changed my life because just at the end of the day, is this the right thing? Am I being fair? If I answer those two questions in each of my interactions, not only do I feel good about myself, but I feel good about how I make others feel.
I love that. And I am in the interest of time. So thank you so much, Jonesy, right? And Nick, thank you so much, both of you. There's just so many different ways that we could take this conversation, so many different places, and so many questions that are left unanswered. And in the interest of time, what I want to do is give you guys a heads up on where we're going to close in terms of questions so you can think about those. But we're going to take some questions from the audience. And so the heads up, right, is really along the lines of Jonas, what you mentioned about doing the right thing. So I want you to think about what does that mean in the context of um, in the context of our just socially as well as when we think about the corporate environment, and what does that mean for executives who are interested in figuring how do we advance this, how do we advance identity and culture within the organization, as well as for folks who are listening who are maybe more junior in their careers or just ascending in their careers and want to understand how do I embody the change that I wish to see. So that's just for later. So keep that thought or keep those thoughts. But we're going to go to the chat to grab a couple questions right now. And so the first one we'll go with is there is a question here. Okay, so is intersectionality being dealt with and spoken of on a global level in the DR or in Asia? If so, how is that the same or different than in the US? Before you all jump in with to make sure that we're all talking, having the same conversation. And I want to want you to frame your questions with this definition of intersectionality in mind, which is a definition that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. And it is that intersectionality is an analytical framework for understanding how aspects of, are these conversations happening in the Dominican Republic and in Asia or in China or in Ecuador?
Sorry if I missed your question. You were my connection was a little.
Oh, okay. I'll repeat the question.
Please.
So it's yeah. So the question is when
I think Layla's having internet issues, so let's improvise, right? We're going to improvise what we do. So, based on Kimberly's definition, I would say that in the Dominican Republic, those conversations are happening. There's a lot of discussion around, how to move forward, specifically with our neighbors in Haiti and dealing in the Dominican Republic as well. And I think the focus is going to be really on how do we move forward and how do we involve all of our various constituents so that we can be more in tune with what's happening around us. So at a high level, that's what I've seen. I have a lot of family in the Dominican Republic. When Layla mentioned earlier, and Nick, the many cousins, I've got a ton. So they keep me abreast. I'm always on WhatsApp or Messenger, Signal, talking to them all the time. And there's now with the access, the advent, and the accessibility that's out there, there's a lot of work being done to make sure that we're covering those that are not as privileged as others. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and if I may add to this as well, I would say all depends on, I will say, a few factors: countries and communication in general, and also companies that you're working for or working with. that do global business. The reason bringing this up is because what I found actually, companies who just primarily doing in their own country, especially in China, for example, you will find two norms. One of them that are very global in nature because they have access with global business, and they'll be able to get exposed to those. So they're more open to those conversations, especially the younger generation. But you have other cases where they're very close-minded, just primarily because they just own the business in China. Just as one example. But the other thing also I want to highlight is the fact that the younger generation are the one who are driving those conversations. You know, I'm 50 years old, 54 years old right now. But I can say that the younger generation is the one that driving that conversation about race, about that. I've seen it in different form. I've seen it here in the United States a lot more advanced in terms of those conversations than in other countries. But in Ecuador, for example, that is had happened in the past, I would say 10 years now, and it's growing quite a bit, right? Diversity, race, ethnicity, respect, and so on. So I can see a world, a time where all the countries will catch up. They will all say one country, leading the efforts, more, faster than others. But I have seen change around the world.
Wonderful. I apologize. I'm having internet issues
Layla,
right now, y'all.
we have you
Can
back?
you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
All
Now
right.
we can.
Apologize. Okay. So just in time to catch the tail end of your comment there, Nick. Thank you. So rolling right ahead. So one more question here. So when we think of, it says here, leadership to drive individuality and intersectionality is the topic here. How should leaders approach overcoming biases and stereotypes that tarnish and encounter the power of intersectionality at work?
I think it's a great question. I saw that coming in and I wanted to chime in on that one. So thank you for that, Layla. I would say that leadership has to be intentional about this, right? And what I mean by that is you can't just say you're going to do something. You have to acknowledge that it exists, right? You have to talk about it. You have to be about it. It shouldn't be just when it's a flavor du jour to do, or it's happening in the news. We have to be intentional in the approach. I think another superpower that leadership can leverage and use is being vulnerable themselves, right? And use that wisely and use it often, because that people will relate the more authentic you are and the more meaningful that you are. So for me, that's how we approach that, specifically on the intentional side of things, right? And people can see and companies can tell when you're just quote unquote paying lip service. So be intentional, be involved, and nothing brings intention or showcases intention as good as showing that you mean it, and being vulnerable is a way of being able to relate to others.
Yeah, and also just to add that as well, right? I 100% agree with you on this. Is the fact that we have to continue educating more and more. We educate, we share stories and experience. Going back to storytelling, right? Everybody can relate to a story on one way or the other, regardless of what race, ethnicity, background, diverse. I mean, it doesn't matter really. You relate to a story. We relate to story about respect, we talk about family, about what to do to make a difference, things like that. That will kind of, in a way, separate a little bit that conversation about bias and stereotype, and then people start to seeing other people, regardless of color and race, or how do you are, or what you are, how you think, and how be able to collaborate. We have to, start that now. Needless to say, of course, there's a lot more to come because as human beings, we judge. Everybody judge different levels of judging, especially when you meet the person for the first time, right? First 5 minutes, according to the rule.
Mhm.
So we have to continue educating. Like I said, I have a lot of in my life people looking at me and say, "Oh yeah, you're good that way," and then I turn the conversation the other way around. But it's a conversation and the education and the sharing of stories that will make a difference.
I mean, y'all, if you haven't heard it here, storytelling. Storytelling is magical as we think about being able to really change narratives, really empower folks to leverage the powers that they have to really make a difference. So I just wanted to point that out before jumping into the next question here, which is very similar, but more related to underrepresentation. So, what are the steps that businesses can take to remedy the challenges of underrepresentation? And maybe, you know what, just to make this interesting, let's talk about one sort of like one or two things that they could do that are sort of like reasonable and that might be attainable, and then one sort of like moonshot, like something that's like out of this world that could potentially change the game completely. If you have thoughts in that realm.
I'm gonna hold off on the moonshot one because
Okay.
that's a big one, and I don't have any moonshots right now. But I think on the kind of short term, and I find to be simple, broaden your horizons. Right, underrepresentation is really you're going to the wrong pond. Expand your pond so that you're looking for candidates that can match what you're looking for. I can tell you right now, at least in my space, there's a bunch of people from very different, varied backgrounds that are really good at information and cybersecurity. So we'll look for them, and we'll find women, we'll find minorities, we'll find everybody. But it has to be intentional, right? When I joined Jack Henry about a year ago, I was kind of the first person that looked like me in technology in this place, and they broadened their horizons, right, so that they can find someone like me. And I find that that's kind of the first thing that companies can do to help with underrepresentation. Two, is be intentional about the fact that it's not only going to those ponds, but specifically fishing for those folks that you want to make sure you bring it in, right? So again, I use my company as an example. Bringing folks in your at the director level, right? On the board of directors, do you have the right level of representation that reflects the world around us? So I think if you start from the top down, then it's easier than to do it across the board. But I think you need to start at the leadership levels, at the board levels, and then it'll trickle down. So moonshot, right? So again, now that we got that out of the way, kind of the moonshot is start with the board of directors. Make sure you make that impact, right? Because that's where it really, the world around you will start to change. So that's my moonshot.
Love it. Nick, what about
Yeah,
you?
no, no. To add to that, I mean, so I like the moonshot, by the way, because I agree with you. I could go to the top, right? But also, if you think about it, it's a two-way thing as well, right? The companies are doing a lot right now, but I think clearly they have to do more, right? You'll be able to diversity and the representation and be able to hire accordingly. But the companies also can be able to leverage all the information and data and research if they want to leverage it, because it is proven that a diverse team, if you follow Myers-Briggs and so, I mean, you think about it, you're coming from different background, different points of view, and so will make the whole team more successful and more productive. So that alone, companies should be able to start thinking about, right? Not just to say, here's a check mark, it's a check in the checkbox to say, oh yeah, now we hire X amount of Latinos, X amount of minorities. The other thing also I always encourage in my team as well is the be prepared, become prepared. You know, as us as minorities, regardless of what country you live and so on, we have to be prepared to showcase that this is not we're meeting the box or we're meeting this line item in HR. We are here to make a difference, and we are here to change. If that's the case, combine it with those two, that's my moonshot. You know, you don't want to be, we don't want to be feel entitled. That's my message to everyone, right? You want to come prepared, but also the companies are making their changes to be able to the two worlds meet into one.
Awesome. Thank you both for going with me on that question there. I know it was a stretch. But to be fair, I can share also a moonshot idea that I have, which, you know, might not be much of a moonshot. Who knows? Maybe we're moving in this direction. You know, when we think about the corporate context and what gets done, right? The things that get done are the things that get rewarded and the things that get paid. And so I wonder what would happen if we were to tie, you know, these ID&E outcomes to compensation, right? Or to promotion or to visibility and projects that folks might get. Like, how might that accelerate things? And so, you know, in my quiet moments, I think about things like that. And, you know, who knows? Maybe the next generation that's coming up behind us might be able to find a way to make that happen. But I'm hopeful. So just to be fair to you all, I wanted to put that out there so that I'm also in the hot seat. We can take, I think, one more question, and then I'm gonna sort of wrap us up with that question that I put top of mind for you before we went into the Q&A. So here, let's see. So we've got, okay, so this question is for Yonesy. So we keep hearing a lot about lack of available talent in cybersecurity, but yet minority representation is very low. What best practices have you seen that resulted in greater attraction of minority candidates in cybersecurity leadership roles? How do you measure progress?
Yeah, so that's a multi-part question. Great question, by the way, from the audience. So I think the first thing that needs to happen is really around. There's a talent war going out there right now. I can tell you that people are losing folks. There's like battles of salaries going left and right. So we can go into and deal with that. It's a whole different separate issue. So we're going to move that to the side.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that there are definitely a lot of qualified folks out there. But as you may know, on the leadership roles, it's a very small community. And right now, we are trying to break that mold. And as a matter of fact, I am part of a cohort of minority CISOs, right? And we meet about once a month, and we are sharing those opportunities. We're bringing others, right, that maybe next in line so that we start having this conversation. So as we're approached for CISO roles, senior leadership roles in cybersecurity, we have a list of what these openings are. We're bringing folks along the way. So there are grassroots movements that are happening today to make that change. So it's not a best practice. It's just that no one else is doing it. So we are doing it, and we're starting from the ground up. And right now, I can tell you that we started doing this about 5 months ago. We started with 5 people around a Zoom call. I think that we've got about 54 CISOs in Fortune 200, Fortune 1000 organizations today getting together to talk about how to tackle this moving forward, how we measure it. Well, the amount of folks that are minorities that are in CISO or leadership roles in cybersecurity, but more needs to be done. And I don't believe just in information and cybersecurity, also in other roles as well. Because again, look around you, you'll find that the leadership ranks don't reflect our population, right? So there's a lot of work to be done, but there's a lot of focus on how we again send the elevator, push up and pull up. That was what my favorite high tech quote is, that one. So we're going to continue to do that. Great question.
Awesome.
Maybe if I may add, actually, coming from the vendor side of cybersecurity with Palo Alto Networks, and the top down, from the CEO down, had made commitment for diversity. As a matter of fact, if you see the board directors and the executive council at the company is diverse already. So that's a big push as you continue to do that. So no, absolutely right. I agree with you. I mean, there's a lot more to do. But we got to continue pushing it. Like I said, we're like, it was still your name, Nessie. We're stubborn. We're gonna go ahead until we hear the yes, we are never stopping. So
Awesome. Well, so thank you again, right, for being such great panelists and just for being so great and rich in terms of answering these questions. I am going to close us out with one last question, right? And this one is really thinking about the audience that's watching you all right now. What words of wisdom, words of encouragement, or advice do you have for folks who are navigating the realities of identity, intersectionality, privilege in their everyday lives? What do you have to say? What can you say to them?
we could start actually just embrace the be different status. I mean, I keep saying, right? We don't have to fit a mold in order to succeed. We have proven, we have leaders in this call, we have leaders in the whole in areas where you don't just be different. Now, different, you have to also know how to adapt into different situations and your careers and life in general. But at the end of the day is how be able to channel that inner self, leveraging all the backgrounds that you have, what we have learned, from our Latino side, on my case as well, from the Chinese side, and be able to say, look, I'm not going to fit them all. I'm going to go ahead and do the trailblazing things, tell the stories, right? But at the same time, also do it with respect in keeping teams and family first mentality. So,
Love it. Jonathan?
For me, it's simple, right? Be fair, do the right thing, be authentic, and at each step of the way, focus, be obsessive in delivering positive outcomes.
Love it. Y'all hear words of encouragement, words of wisdom from Nick and Yonesy. Hopefully, this was as nourishing to your souls as it was for me. Just to wrap us up nicely, I'll just add um, your difference is a comparative advantage. So make your difference make a difference, is what I would leave you all with. And so, with that, again, wow, thank you both so much. Thank you, High Tech, for allowing us to have this very rich dialogue. I am sure that, as it was nourishing to me, it was also nourishing to our viewers. And again, you have a comparative advantage. So use it. And with that, see you all next time. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.